I decided to watch Cuties because there has been a lot of commentary about it. About a month ago when the trailer came out, I was disturbed by it. As I said in that previous video, my initial reaction was WTF. I wanted to go into it in further detail after the movie came out. I didn't want to do myself the disservice of commenting on something. I didn't want to have y'all hear my opinion on something that I actually hadn't viewed. I do think it's objectification of minors, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about. Be sure to click subscribe, share with friends, and comment as well. I tried to walk into this viewing thinking, okay, if I weren't a mom of girls, if I weren't a conservative prude, things that have been said about me, what would my thought process be? Would I see this Sundance award-winning film by a Senegalese French woman of color and think, wow, good for her? She said in all of her previous interviews that she created this film because she felt as if she needed to talk about the over-sexualization of young girls in society, and that she wanted to highlight how easy it is for girls to fall into the trap of being over-sexualized in society. I still think that you could potentially make a film about this and that you could address this very serious issue without actually objectifying young girls. I see no redeeming quality in the film. I see no redeeming characters, and I see a lot of objectification of young women, even as they're saying that they didn't want to do this. There's a scene that is in the trailer where she sees Angie, and she's one of the Latina Cuties. It's the dance crew that they kind of name themselves, and you see them coming together, and frankly, they're bullies. They're really jerks. They treat Ami horribly. They harass her at school. They make racial comments about how she's from Senegal. They call her homeless. They say that she dresses horribly. They call each other the B word. There's lots of sexual references and undertones. At one point, they're watching pornography, and in a kind of hazing thing, they try to get Ami to go record a young man that they think is cute peeing. They want a D-pic of a teen boy at their school. It's really disturbing. The only two adults that you see consistently in the film are Ami's mother and this auntie that is kind of viewed as this Islamic woman of faith that leads, I think, with a heavy hand. Ami starts to have this kind of interest and obsession, in a way, with the Cuties. She watches them do things at school. They all have social media. They're watching pornography. They get mad at the teacher who tells them to go to the principal's office because they skipped class to do it. And all of this, they're looking at social media, all this stuff. They all have cell phones. They're kind of the troublemakers in school. But through this, instead of it deterring Ami, in a way, it kind of weirdly draws her in, where she decides that she wants to be like these girls. The most moving and really heartbreaking, I think, scenes for me that I thought was the most powerful in the film, which shows how you can talk about the patriarchy or you can talk about your issues with religion without objectifying young girls, is there is a scene when Ami is in her mother's bedroom and she hides under the bed because she hears her mother and the auntie coming, and you only see the mother's feet and you only see the auntie's feet, and you see Ami under the bed like hiding. And it's a really powerful scene in which she overhears her mother having to make phone calls, informing, I guess, friends and family members that her husband is bringing back a second wife from Senegal. And you can see Ami's like shock and tears as she realizes that her mom is hurting over this, and that the auntie is telling the mom, you have to be strong, you have to do the right thing. In other words, you have to accept that he has a second wife and be okay with this. I thought that that was really amazing. And shortly after that, I think the next scene is actually Ami taking her brothers to the grocery store, and I assumed that she was doing that because her mother was at home making those horrific phone calls, having to accept, according to the auntie, that her husband had moved on. When she's helping her cousin unload the car, he says, hand me my bag, and instead of handing him the bag and the phone, she steals his cell phone. So second time she's stolen something. She's watching these French stars, I presume, and dance crews, and their moves online and their thong-cladded, oiled up behinds, and kind of practicing the moves and seeing what they do. She's wearing, all of the girls are like constantly wearing crop tops. They're most likely wearing push-up bras, because I've never met such a well-endowed 11-year-old in my life. And they're commenting on each other's bodies, on each other's underwear, on each other's looks, putting on makeup. Why weren't the parents there? There's a scene in which Angie starts to cry to Ami and says, you know, my parents say that they're disappointed in me as a daughter and that I am a bad daughter. And the reason I dance is because I hope that one day I can dance in front of my parents and they'll come to the competition and they will love me and say I'm a good daughter. Which is so odd because I'm thinking, all right, you're an 11-year-old girl, and if my daughter did that as an 11-year-old girl, I would be horrified at the time I missed out on in teaching her how to do the right things. And it just breaks down from there. There's consistently undertones of the girls over-sexualizing themselves all the while they don't understand. There's a really disturbing scene in which they're in the bathroom and you can tell that they're watching porn, and Ami is hearing a conversation that the cuties are having about pornography, and they're talking about like, well, if it's rape, it goes all the way through you, obviously talking about male genitalia. They're talking about how they have brothers and how their brothers' genitalia doesn't look like the guys in the porn that they're watching. I'm very aware that unfortunately younger and younger nowadays, children are exposed to porn, but it was one of those many moments in the film in which I thought, and Googled the ages of the actresses and thought, okay, if Ducouré is trying to say that an 11-year-old shouldn't understand pornography or shouldn't understand, you know, sexualization or sexuality in this way, then how can they possibly then think that it's okay for these children to act out this, right? There's another scene in which Kumba, he's one of the girls, they're at the park and she picks up a condom, and it's obviously a condom. And unfortunately, if you live in Los Angeles and Eric Garcetti's crappy city, then you have seen trash like heroin needles and condoms in local parks. Kumba picks this up and she blows it up and she thinks that it looks like a breast, and all the friends are like, oh my God, that's a condom, and ew, that's so gross. And they start making fun of her, and they tell her she looks like death and that she's gonna die and that's how she's gonna get AIDS and it's gonna be awful. And she starts to cry because her friends are making fun of her, and she notes, how was I supposed to know? I don't know what a condom is. And it's another further example of, yeah, how is an 11-year-old girl supposed to know what a condom is? I would argue that an 11-year-old girl should not know what a condom is. Visualization gets increasingly disturbing. Of course, the content up to now has been frustrating and disturbing, but I really wondered what the heck was happening on set, or what the heck happened in the auditions, that it never crossed anyone's mind that not only putting these girls in this wardrobe, in this attire, and around this subject matter was problematic and potentially traumatizing and life-altering, but then the rest of the cast and the crew that were filming these young girls, 11 years old, mind you, with these crotch shots. And that's what they are. This isn't, oh, you know, it was a misunderstanding, because that was one of the things that we had originally heard. That, oh, look at the original poster for the film, the French poster versus the Netflix poster. And only the Netflix poster was wrong. You have to see the film to understand that this is a coming-of-age film. It is not a feminine coming-of-age film. This is not a film that I think is empowering to women. I don't think that this is a film that is empowering to people of faith. I don't think that this is a film that is even empowering to immigrants or people of color. Seriously, I think that it is damaging and creepy and doesn't portray the message that the director wanted it to portray, or claimed that it portrayed. In doing research about this and realizing that the actresses themselves are between the ages of 11 and 14, I was increasingly disturbed. A lot of people are commenting on Instagram right now asking if it was abuse. I realized, and my jaw dropped, when I saw that over 650 girls auditioned for the role of Ami. And this is Ducouré's like freshman film. This was an opportunity, and this is something that even leftist film critics have written about. And this was a film that was lauded. I mean, Tessa Thompson of Marvel fame, who plays Valkyrie, was like, it's a film that gutted me. You all should see it. It's so important. I just consistently think that you can make important films without objectifying young girls. This is something that other child actors are talked about, or the general conversation every time, unfortunately, it comes out that one of them was sexually assaulted by somebody on set or in Hollywood, or abused by someone. We hear a lot of people say #MeToo and that we need to address this, But then you hear about 650 girls auditioning for the role of Ami. And I think about how much broader the problem is in society and how much broader the problem is in Hollywood. 650 girls saw what job posting? Their parents gave them the permission to practice the lines and go. They presumably have managers and agents, and some, if they're more successful, probably were able to afford headshots and hair and makeup and all of these things, right? How can you say that you want to protect and change Hollywood and that Hollywood needs to be more aware of women and girls and minorities, and then on the other hand, praise a film like this? It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up to me, and it was like a gutted feeling I just had throughout the whole thing of, this is really creepy. It wasn't entertaining. I didn't see the point of the director at all through her lens. I think that you can talk about the horrible things happening. I think that you can bring about change in culture and in film. I think that you can raise tough questions through art and literature without being creepy. There's one scene that I felt was the most real scene, and it was how I kind of felt through the whole thing. When there's a security guard that tells the girls, hey, I'm gonna call the cops, because they break into like a laser tag place and they're goofing off. And he says, I'm gonna call the cops, give me your parents' numbers. And they freak out because they're like, no, you can't call our parents. And he's like a young security guard. And then an older looking like white security guard comes along. Mind you, they're still all in their booty shorts and crop tops and all this stuff. And they're telling the second security guard, this guy's a creep, he was groping us. And he was like, no, I wasn't. And he lays out what happened and how they were accusing him of being a creep and groping them. And the other guy is like, oh, did this really happen? And then the girls start to freak out because they realize that they made it to the finals of the competition. And they're like, please, you can't call our parents. We're dancers. We have to dance. And Ami starts dancing. And the camera lingers over her body and her breasts and her butt. And in a very sexualized way, obviously she's dancing. And it shows the face of the white security guard enjoying it. And then it shows the face of the younger security guard that's like, dude, seriously? And so they let them go, / the girls run away. And there's that moment, the moment of the younger security guard, I felt like was me the whole film, where he's like, dude, seriously, kind of what's your problem? Because he saw his coworkers like enjoyment at watching these young girls dance in such a provocative way. It is consistent throughout the film that, once again, and I'll repeat this, they are talking about and doing things that they cannot even comprehend. The most disturbing, the whole film is wrong, but the most disturbing part of the film is something that some other people pointed out. The cousin realizes that Ami stole his phone, and they all live in the same floor and on the same structure. Her mom faints at the dinner table. He comes to help. He tells her, hey, your mom's okay, and she's FaceTiming or whatever, Angie. And he's like, hey, wait a second, that's my phone. You took my phone. And she decides to take off her hoodie, show her midriff, and essentially try to strip for him. And there's where he looks at her weirded out, and he's like, what are you doing? And he goes to grab his phone. They get into a scuffle. She runs into the bathroom, and in great detail, the camera, it does not show her genitalia, but the camera shows her in a leg shot, pulling down her shorts and pulling down her underwear. It's disturbing. And she pulls down her underwear, and she takes the stolen camera and she puts it in between her legs, and she takes a picture, and then it shows her posting that picture. It does not show the image, but it shows Ami taking this action. The cousin is yelling outside the door saying that he's not going to leave until he gets his phone back, and that's when she opens the door and kind of throws him his phone. She shows up the next day to hang out with her friends, and they're all upset with her, and they call her a slut and a B word, and they said, everyone's talking about us. Everyone thinks that we're a slut because of what you posted. And it's such a weird, they seem hormonal, they seem irrational, they seem to not have any level of understanding, of course, of the world around them. There seem to be no leadership characters. I guess that's a point. They are able to kind of, I was like, are kids able to dress like that in regular school? Or is it just the French? I understand that the French like to push envelopes sometimes, especially in film, that happens. And they get mad at her, and they kind of like cut her out of the group. And when she's cut out of the group, this is when she starts to have an emotional and a physical lash out, I think, at the world. So the teacher calls her up at some point, calls Ami up, and a boy calls her a slut because of the picture that she posted, and she takes a pen and stabs him in the hand. And of course, this is where it escalates to her mom finally figuring out what she's been up to. So there's this scene where her mom is kind of smacking her around, and the auntie steps in and says, no, we need to cleanse her. And in that scene, I didn't quite understand it, but it was as if Ami started to dance in a way in which she was possessed, as she's standing in a cross-like position and they're splashing water on her and saying prayers. And then it turns into a sexualized twerk type, tongue out, body on the floor. And it was a mix of like scenes from The Exorcist and scenes from a Cardi B video. And I think that leads to her mom thinking that she's possessed and calling a person of prayer of their faith to come over. This is like literally the last 15 minutes of the film. She decides that she's really troubled by this, and she's still practicing all of her moves, and she really wants to be a part of the dance competition. By the way, these moves are like shown. There's one whole slow-mo scene in which they're on these stairs outside of like the metro, and they're doing these suggestive scenes, and it is zooming in on their butts and their bellies and their breasts and their faces. I mean, if I made some of the faces that these young girls made in this film, you would think that I was like taking a Tinder profile picture or sexting my husband. Like, let's be honest. Those are the things that instantly came to mind of not okay for someone to do in public, not okay for children of any age to be doing. There's a scene in which she wants Yasmin to be out of the picture so she can dance in the competition with her friends, and she pushes her into the river. And it's clear that the young girl can't swim and is drowning, and Ami is just standing there watching this happen in her glitter and her lashes and her lipstick and her hair dye and her seductive dance costume. She is watching Yasmin drown, and there's looks to be no remorse, no question on her face of what she is doing. And I honestly thought, like, wow, is she gonna watch this girl drown? And is this like the emotional dramatic arc of the film? Thankfully, Yasmin doesn't drown. She kind of is able to make her way over to a buoy, and without any level of conscience or apology or anything, Ami runs away to the competition. And at the competition, she's kind of like makes it at the perfect time where she's able to go on stage even though the other girls are still mad at her. Any other competitors that you see are also dressed very sexualized in midriff bearing booty shorts and glitter and stuff. And you see the crowd like clapping and excited as an F-bomb N-word bearing song starts. And interestingly, of the 4 judges, the only one at the beginning of their routine that seems disturbed is the older looking white woman. As the routine continues, you see like a couple of creepers in the crowd that are enjoying it, but you see a mom kind of going from clapping to disturbed and trying to cover her kid's eyes, and the judges kind of looking at each other uncomfortably. And there is a moment in which confetti falls, and it reminds Ami of the confetti for her father's second wedding. And it's like she has this moment of an emotional breakdown, and she stops dancing and she starts to cry, and she runs back to her mother. And when she runs to her mother, it's the first time in the film in which like the mother is viewed as, I think, endearing and loving. And they have a conversation where she says, listen, you don't have to go to this wedding. And so the film ends, and it would appear that Ami is kind of leaving both things behind. There's this quiet scene with no words in which the dress that she was supposed to wear to her father's wedding and the outfit that she wore to the competition are both left on her little twin bunk bed. And you see her coming down the stairs of the apartment structure in jeans and a t-shirt with her natural beautiful hair. The actress is a naturally beautiful young lady, young girl, and it's kind of this moment where there's music in the background. She doesn't say anything, and it's as if she is leaving both of those worlds behind. The patriarchal Senegalese like Islam and the over-sexualized bully friends. Then it shows her going back to a routine that most 11-year-old girls should do, and that is jumping rope with other kids in the street. So sorry about the length of this, but I wanted to give you guys kind of almost scene by scene, moment by moment depiction of what happened in the film. Like I said on Twitter, I watched it so you don't have to. I think that over-sexualization of girls is a problem. I think pedophilia is a problem. And I think Hollywood creating things like this and trying to say that using 11-year-old girls for the purpose of a message is not healthy, and it's wrong. And I think that all of the criticism is appropriate. I do not think that death threats against anyone are appropriate. And if you have any specific questions about the film, please let me know. I feel like I need to cleanse myself of the things I have seen. And really, I think it's just a further reminder of, as conservatives, and if you're not a conservative, still glad you're watching, as people who care about children, as people who care about our children and strangers' children and the future children of America, we have to be aware of what is being created. We have to be aware of what is being supported by people at the New Yorker and Variety and Hollywood Reporter and in Hollywood of itself, at Sundance, etc. And we have to combat it with truth, and we have to combat it with evidence, and we have to combat it in hopefully a well-spoken manner. We have to know what we're up against, and we have to, with knowledge, really address these issues and question how these things even get financed and come to fruition, because it is a film that I really do think should not be available for viewing, and I really am disturbed and confused and frustrated on behalf of the young ladies that starred in the film, because I just do not comprehend how at no point in the process people making this movie weren't troubled by and didn't step away and go, I don't think that this is the right way to portray this message. And of course it brings about a broader conversation of, on one hand, you have the left saying that we need to watch films like this and that they are gritty and creative and wonderful and meant to have you think, and that, the patriarchy and over-sexualization of women on Instagram and YouTube is the problem. But then they lambast conservatives for talking about J-Lo at the Super Bowl objectifying herself, or Cardi B and the WAP video. So I don't understand how you can say you are for one thing if it's Cardi B, but you're not for another if it's an Instagram influencer. But that's, I guess, a broader conversation that I think can stem from the level of hypocrisy that Hollywood consistently shows. So that is all for tonight. Be sure to comment below and let me know your thoughts, and let me know what topics you want me to cover in my next video. Thanks, guys.